Leonardo da Vinci was born April 15, 1452, as the illegitimate son to a 25-year-old peasant girl, Katrina Leonardo. Leonardo da Vinci was named after the town he lived in, Vinci. Shortly after his birth, his father, Sir Perio, took custody, and the mother married someone else and moved to a neighboring town. Each parent kept conceiving with their partners and supplied Leonardo with 17 half-sisters and brothers. Because Leonardo's father, Sir Perio, was a notary, Leonardo had access to many scholarly texts. In the town of Vinci, there is a long-standing painting tradition, which most likely sparked Leonardo's love to paint. At the age of 15, he was sent to work as an apprentice in a renowned workshop at the Andrea del Verrocchi in Florence. In the period of 1470 to 1475, Leonardo became significantly better than his master Verrocchio. While painting an angel in Verrocchio's baptism of the church, Leonardo was so much better than his master, it is said that Verrocchio was so ashamed he never painted again. Leonardo resolved to stay in his workshop until 1477, when he set one up for himself. In 1482, Leonardo set out to earn money, and therefore went to work with the Duke of Milan, leaving behind his prior job in Florence. During the 17 years he worked for the Duke of Milan, is when Leonardo truly became a Renaissance man, which refers to a person who has many accomplishments in a variety of fields. This person knows a little about everything instead of everything about one thing.
A Renaissance man of today would be somebody that is involved in a lot of different activities. They would be curious about what's going on in the world politically. They would be involved in what's going on in the world socially, such as a charitable event or a specific cause, something that would help other people. They would also be always searching for knowledge and always trying to improve themselves and to create a better world for the people around them.
Some of the jobs Duke Ludovico Suarez put upon Leonardo included painting, sculpting, designing court festivals, weapons buildings, and machinery. His studies on weapons led to a tank and other vehicles, different types of combat devices, and submarines. While there, he also accomplished his studies on nature, flying machines, geometry, mechanics, musical construction, canals, and architecture. Because all of these various projects Leonardo put on, he often never finished what he started. During the 17 years working for the Duke, he completed 6 artworks. This included The Last Supper and The Virgins on the Rocks, leaving dozens of painting and projects incomplete. The reason for his lack of completion was because most of his time was captivated studying nature. He did this observing or cutting bodies or questioning universal truths. Leonardo was a very studious man, keeping meticulously illustrated notebooks. In these notebooks included 4 main themes: architecture, paintings, human anatomy, and mechanics. After the Duke of Milan was invaded in 1499, Leonardo spent the next 16 years of his life traveling around Europe. He also traveled a year with the Borgia army as a military engineer, where he met Niccolò Machiavelli, author of The Prince. Together, they painted the Battle of Anghiera. During this time, he also designed the bridge to cover the Golden Horn in Constantinople. Around the year 1503, Leonardo began his most famous work on the Mona Lisa, but around this time, tragedy struck at home and his father died in 1504, and all of the money was given to his half-brothers and sisters. Over the battle of inheritance, his uncle died, and luckily for Leonardo received the uncle's land and money. From 1513 to 1516, he began working for the Pope, continuing his study on human anatomy and physiology, but was unable to dissect. In the year 1516, Leonardo's patron, Giovanni de' Medici died, and Leonardo was offered the title of premier painter by Francis I, King of France. His last patron, Francis I, also gave Leonardo a job, including a stipend in Manor House. After suffering from paralysis of the right hand, Leonardo was still able to teach and draw. He taught studies of cats, horses, dragons, St. George, anatomical studies, studies on the nature of water, drawings of the deluge, and various machines. Leonardo left many inventions behind, one of which was the water lift. This invention consists of a water wheel, 2 Archimedes screws, and 2 towers. As the water wheel turns, the screws turn, pushing the water up to the highest tower. The tall tower acts as a receiver for gravity-fed water pipes. Another invention was called the landing gear. This is a detail from Leonardo's helicopter. This mechanism, the landing gear, consists of a prop and a ladder. Both the prop and the ladder were retractable. The next invention was the helicopter. This is a detail of the mechanism that drives the helicopter. 2 men would run on the lower levels, which would rotate. The rotation would force the upper fans to rotate as well, lifting the helicopter off the ground. Another invention was the machine gun. This machine actually consisted of 3 sets of machine guns set on a rotating drum. When the first set fired, the force of the explosion would pivot the guns down, bringing the next set of guns to the top, ready to be fired. The next machine was the thread cutter. This machine cuts threads of screws. A cutting blade is attached to the 2 long screws on the bed of the table. A third bar, the one to have the thread cut into it, would be laid in between the 2 screws. As the cranks on the end of the table were turned, the cutting blade would be carried down the 2 screws, creating an even groove to be used for screws, bolts, and etc. The next invention I'll talk about is the catapult. This stone thrower consists of a base curved beam, gears, and a release mechanism. A stone would be laid on top of the arced wooden beam, and the release mechanism would be tightened with the gear. When the beam was released, the force of the release would catapult the stone into the air. The most famous creation of Leonardo da Vinci was his Mona Lisa. He began this portrait in 1503 and ended it 4 years later. It is unknown who the actual Mona Lisa is, but some historians believe it is a female version of Leonardo himself. What makes his portrait so spectacular was that it was the first one to be perfectly symmetrical. The Mona Lisa was stolen from Paris on the 21st of August, 1911, from an Italian thief who had taken the painting to Italy. It resurfaced some 2 years later in Florence, when an Italian named Vinci offered to sell the painting to the Uffizi Gallery for a total of $100,000. It was exhibited for a time and then returned to Paris. A tragedy struck on the day May 2, 1519 in Clox, France. The death of Leonardo da Vinci was said to be in the arms of his last patron, as depicted in this photo, and it is sad to think what more he could have done with a longer lifespan.